Number 5.
Punch a Bunch is a physics-based boxing game made with Unreal Engine 4. It was created by a YouTuber named Pontypants who chronicled the roughly 3 years of development over 33 devlogs. In these videos, he talks about many game dev struggles you'll most likely also face, and you can also see his process of getting used to Unreal Engine, so there's definitely a lot to learn here. Despite being his first game ever, he got a lot of great feedback from other game developers and gamers, and Punch a Bunch was also generally well received when it released on Steam in 2023. Later on, he was also able to release the game on the Nintendo Switch. Punch a Bunch is a great example of how to create a unique and recognizable visual style, and also the impact that making devlogs can have on both the quality and the marketing of your game. I'm pretty sure Punch a Bunch wouldn't have performed nearly as well if it was just thrown up on Steam by some random person without any build-up. Pontypants went on to develop another game called A Difficult Game About Climbing, which he managed to finish in a single year. However, for this title he started out with Godot and later on switched over to Unity, making it a bit less relevant for this video. But it's still a great showcase of how his experience from Punch a Bunch in creating and marketing games carried over, with this title being picked up by many big content creators and sitting at over $500,000 of estimated net revenue on Steam, which is more than double when compared to Punch a Bunch.
Number 4.
The Plucky Squire is a standout Unreal Engine 4 game that seamlessly blends 2D and 3D gameplay. Parts of your adventure unfold within the pages of storybooks, while others allow you to explore a fully realized 3D space. This clever mechanic sets it apart from other action platformers and helped it gain massive attention when it was first announced about 2 years ago. There are multiple interviews and talks where the two co-founders of All Possible Futures let us in on how they utilized Unreal to bring their vision to life. But since I couldn't find any mention of Paper 2D, I had to dig deeper. When I reached out, Jonathan Biddle, the lead programmer and co-design director, was kind enough to chat with me about their workflow. It turns out that they do in fact utilize Paper 2D, but in a different way than you might imagine. Rather than being displayed directly in the game, sprites and flipbooks are mostly used as containers that hold information such as the UV coordinates or currently displayed frame. This data is then used to draw onto a canvas texture, combining characters and background sprites into a single image. That texture is then projected onto 3D meshes like the pages of a storybook or even curved objects like a mug. And there's a lot of trickery involved in achieving this.
The level actually sits above the room. When you see the room, the 3D room, on the ceiling above there's lots of tiny little levels. They're just floating there.
Getting the transitions between the 2D and 3D sections right was crucial, but required some trial and error. They first tried sliding between the spaces, which didn't look smooth enough, and after some iterations found that jumping in and out of objects turned out to be the perfect solution. I also asked Jonathan about how they utilized Blueprint visual scripting, and while their first Unreal prototype called Hyperhead used a 50-50 mix of blueprints and C++, for the Plucky Squire they decided to almost exclusively use C++. Being industry veterans and wanting the programmers to own the gameplay implementation, this worked out well for them. And even though I often highlight successful projects made with blueprints only, this is a showcase that if you have the required skill set, doing the exact opposite can also work out just fine. During development, the team grew to roughly 20 developers from all over the world working remotely. But this project started out with only Jonathan and James creating prototypes and figuring out what makes this game unique and fun, all while being fathers and having to balance family life with game development. So I believe this is a success story that can be very inspiring even for solo developers or smaller teams. And there's so much more to talk about, but I'll have to cut it off here. If you're interested, I might make a dedicated video on the Plucky Squire in the future with all the information I got, so let me know in the comments.
Number 3.
Ender Lilies is a dark fantasy Metroidvania with Souls-like elements created using Unreal Engine 4. I believe it's the prime example that you absolutely can make 2D games with Unreal and there's no need to switch to another game engine just for that purpose. Ender Lilies looks amazing, is well optimized, and has a fairly small package size of 1.2 GB. It also makes use of a software called Spine to create bone-based animations, and Spine's SDK allows these animations to be played inside of Unreal. This approach is much more memory efficient and less work intensive than hand-drawing every animation into a sprite sheet. At this point in time, Ender Lilies achieved an estimated net revenue of over $12 million on Steam alone, which is about $1.5 million more than when I last checked about 8 months ago, so the game is still selling units. When playing the game on Steam Deck, I was able to confirm that it performs amazingly well and easily reaches frame rates above 300 when unlocked. But of course you'd probably want to lock it to 60 FPS with the regular Steam Deck or 90 FPS for the OLED version, but this just goes to show that Ender Lilies clears the performance bar without breaking a sweat. After the success of Ender Lilies, the developer went on to work on Ender Magnolia, again utilizing Unreal Engine, and I might cover that game in a future episode. And if you want to know how to make 2D games in Unreal by yourself, please use the discount link in the description for my 12-hour-long Unreal 2D course.
Number 2.
Rune is an action-adventure game developed with Unreal Engine 1 that released all the way back in the year 2000. The main focus of Rune lies in the single-player experience, and you fight your way through hordes of bad guys using a variety of weapons from a Viking's arsenal. However, a PvP multiplayer mode was also included. In the public eye, even nowadays, Unreal Engine is mostly associated with first-person or third-person shooters, and during its early days that was even more so the case. But third-person action games such as this Norse mythology-inspired adventure showed early on that Unreal can be used effectively for games of different genres as well. Rune was generally well received, and it's still available nowadays under the name Rune Classic, which features a few updates and changes.
Number 1.
Walrus Run is a 2D action platformer created with Unreal Engine 5 by a solo developer. It uses the DK bongos as a controller option and recently released on Steam. The game was inspired by Donkey Kong Jungle Beat and also by my DK Bongo Unreal Engine game Bull Beat, which I made a few years ago. In Walrus Run, you can walk left and right by repeatedly hitting the bongos. You can jump by hitting both directions at the same time and attack by clapping. But Eric Callahan, the developer of this title, expanded the moveset by adding a dash move that really spiced up the gameplay. But of course, Walrus Run can also be played with a normal keyboard and controller, because not all of us just have bongos and an adapter laying around. Even though Walrus Run was destined to fail in a commercial sense due to targeting such a niche audience, Eric mostly saw it as a portfolio project to help him hunt for jobs in the game industry. And I think considering the fact that this is his first commercial game and he was able to put it together over 18 months makes this quite impressive. Even though the simple art style might not be everyone's cup of tea, keeping things simple allowed him to create a large majority of models and animations by himself in Blender. I believe the cutscenes for which he used the sequencer are especially well made and have that early 2000s cartoon vibe, while the boss fights are also very engaging, featuring actual boss mechanics the player has to learn. And when I played through the first couple of stages, it was actually quite a lot of fun. Thanks for the key, Eric. It's important to point out that making games and finishing games are two completely different skill sets, and seeing a project through to the end no matter what is extremely important. Instead of only focusing on programming for years on end, Eric was able to improve at art, game design, programming, marketing, and the management side of things all at the same time, which allowed him to develop a balanced skill set that will definitely come in handy for future games. As always, thanks to my awesome patrons.